Hello, my name is Ben Ledoux. I'm a student with the Ameren Center. My proposed senior integrative project is an introduction to interactive media. So my animating question is, how might the combination of a book and video game affect the opinions of different parties? This includes readers, people who just play games, people who do both, people who do neither. Would they form either form of media differently as compared to before versus after? And how, did that come about? Like, what did they like, what didn't they like? Uh, my implementation for this would be an interactive book. It would be a book that you read on your computer, and over time, the reader is slowly introduced to more interactive elements. So you make a choice, you move the character around, and ultimately those choices would result in a story being made. It would develop depending on those choices, so there's different outcomes. And overall, I just want this to be something to be able to introduce people to video games. So it's not going to be some really complex, deep understanding thing. It's just going to be a good story. My first inspiration was Professor James Lee. He is my advisor, and his current research has to do with virtual humans, developing AI that can pass the Turing test, that can be used to help with elderly care or education. It's very interesting, and I highly recommend you check it out. Specifically, when I interviewed him about my project, he mentioned something that is mentioned in our game design class before, where using the word game can carry a negative connotation, and I want to be careful with that because it can lead to a bias before the person has even sat down at the computer. So I want to avoid that. He mentioned when it comes to the story structure, like I said, I want the player to make choices. The problem with that is more choices means exponentially more work. There's a branching story. It'll have all these different variations based on these little tiny choices. He recommended that I look at interactive shows and movies, some games that have done this kind of thing before, to kind of get a good idea of how to do it well. Overall, my takeaway, I still want to do a game with where choices matter. It's not going to be super long, so there's only going to be so much branching, and I can also have a mix of linear segments and bilinear segments where those choices do and don't come into play. And it'll probably just be 2 or 3 main endings and then little variations between them, like a character is there in one, or they're not in another, or their opinion or a piece of dialogue changes. But overall, a couple of main, well-written storylines, keeping it simple, having a high quality, or over a high quantity. My second inspiration is Ken Levine. He's the creator of BioShock, and it's considered one of the best stories in video games. New York Magazine was quoted as saying BioShock proved that video games could be art. Not that this game is going to be on that level, but I want this game to also prove its own point to people who might doubt the value of stories told through video games. Specifically, its influence on my project, the story draws in the player with the choice making. I want the player to want to go back and do it over again, to see how changing your choice changes the story. I want the person to have the choice of either running straight through the story as fast as possible, or taking their time, smelling the roses, finding the little secrets that I'm going to take time to put in. I like player choice, so obviously I like players having the choice to play the game how they want to play. In the future, I'm going to look into determining the genre of the game. I want this to be something for everybody, old, young, any background. So I want to find a genre and a story that will be very widely accepted as, a good story, something that anyone can enjoy. There are some courses at Connecticut College that I'm considering taking. These include things that will help me with level and visual design in the game. I can also look into similar Ammerman projects. Luke Harris made a game called Rome Revisited, which has a more historical or educational aspect to it, and that was another thing where I can possibly add a historical or educational or social aspect to this game. It doesn't have to serve this one purpose. It can be multifaceted. Here's some sources in case you want to do any further reading if you're interested in enough, and thank you so much for your time.